What is up, everybody? My name is Ethan Newberry, the director of Where Dreams Go to Die, and I am joined by Mr. Gary Robbins.
Where's the round of applause?
I'll add it in post.
Okay.
First of all, we'd like to thank you guys for supporting the project, either by watching it online or getting it early advanced screening of it. This is the bonus material, so basically Gary and I are going to sit down and turn this into two parts. The first part, we're going to talk about Gary's 2018 Barkley experience, and the second part, we're going to watch the movie and talk about all the stories and things behind the scenes that maybe didn't get covered in the movie, talk about questions that were asked frequently on tour, and it's just going to be an opportunity for us to talk a bit about the experience for you, Gary, over the last 3+ years. I mean, this has been a long experience for you.
It has, and I was hoping it was going to be a different style of interview right now, and
You don't like being shoved in a corner?
No, I mean, in terms of what we're talking about for 2018,
Mm-hmm.
I thought this would be more of a celebration, and I am finding myself slightly uncomfortable physically because we're jammed in a corner and there's a microphone resting in my beard, and emotionally because I haven't been forced to talk about this year because of all the interview requests that I received. I denied all of them because I just didn't want to talk about it, and I did my blog posting, and that was it for me. And it's going to take me a while to get warmed up and to get into this, and there's a part of me that's very uncomfortable with having to rehash and relive everything because it's just not going the way I want it to go over 3 years.
Well, I mean, let's start there. You have not only shared your experiences at the Barkley Marathons for the last 3 years, but very publicly. So it's not just, here's a race report that I wrote on a blog and posted it out there and let people read it. You had it documented on video form. We've shared the film. Thousands of people have seen the movie. So you're really putting a lot out there. Was that tough? Is it tough? Do you regret it at all?
I don't regret it. And it hasn't made the pressure of the moment any greater. It's not like I felt more stress going into the race this year or more of a need to accomplish what I've set out to do from day one. It makes the post-run recovery from not reaching the goal harder because everybody is paying attention and everybody knows and everybody wants to talk about it, and I don't want to talk about it because sometimes when you go through these things and you want distance, you want to push it to the side and move forward. And I have to say, anybody that really was following along read my report and has been very respectful of that. And because of that, I haven't really had to talk about it much. So 2018, I haven't had to vocalize and put my emotions and thoughts of how it unfolded in front of anybody. It's a different thing to write than it is to speak. It's a different expression. And I was happy that I got my report out there, and I worked on that for two straight days. That took me forever to get that out, but it was necessary, and it was cathartic for me, and it was nice to have something that people could reference. But in terms of actually talking it through, it's not like Linda and I talk about this. I mean, we talked about that in the film jokingly, right? So it's going to take me a few minutes to get warmed up and to basically rehash what just happened a month ago.
Yeah.
I mean, it's basically, a month.
A matter of days, essentially.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So 2018.
Yeah, let's get into it. Part one.
Third attempt at the Barkley. And this year going into it, I actually found myself more fired up to run than I had been in many years.
Yeah.
And I, having invested 2 years on successfully becoming so close, wanted this to be the third year conclusion. And it would have been this kind of almost Cinderella story where everybody watched how close it was in the second year, and so many people were paying attention, and it would make this great trilogy where it was, it would be that perfect storyline that I would be okay with. So I wanted that more than anything else. I wanted that more than ski touring and adventuring this winter.
Right.
And I skied once this entire winter season, whereas last year I skied 35 times when I was training for backcountry skiing for the Barkley because I wanted to have that extra 2, 3, 4, 5% fitness in my legs this year to just leave no doubt. I thought that I could get the race done in 58.5 hours and have a buffer, a window, and not even stress out my family. And so I dedicated myself to my run training specific to Barkley the entire winter. And we did collectively, myself and Linda, put more into it, from experimenting with foods and how we were going to go about things, and a better plan and a better team. Like we cut the fat. We got rid of the crew that we had the last 2 years who were really deficient at taking care of me out there.
You're welcome.
And that was you, wasn't it?
Yeah, well, part of it.
I forgot. We'll just blame Kim and Sean since they're not here.
Since they're not here.
No, but we did. We had John Kelly and Linda as crew this year, and what was interesting is we were more organized from the start. And I kind of look back on it, and I was like, how did we not take the time in the first 2 years to have a fully detailed bulletproof plan for everything? A little bit lax almost on my part, I think, for not having that. But there's so many variables at the Barkley, certainly in the first year, I couldn't anticipate. Anyways, I put a lot of time into training this year and have trained harder through the winter physically for running than I have in many years. Got myself to a fitness level purely for running that I felt like I hadn't touched on since maybe 2013. And showed up at the race ready to put this to rest. And the first lap of the Barkley was fantastic. I stayed conservative early. We didn't make any mistakes. I was methodical in sticking with the right group of people so that we sourced especially the new books on course this year.
Right.
So it's very beneficial to have multiple people looking for a new book. And due to that, the first 2/3 of the first lap, we nailed everything. And then the last third hadn't changed. And that was when I moved on from the collective group. And 2 people came with me, those being Guillaume Kelmetz and Ali Beeben. And we closed out the first lap. I think it was 8:38, like a really solid time.
Right.
Jared and I 2 years ago were 8 hours. And last year, John and I were 9.5 hours due to fog and getting lost and everything. So I wanted to be more calculated and controlled, and it worked. And that was the best I've ever felt after the first lap at the Barkley. We didn't make a single mistake. The fueling went great. And then we got into camp, and because we had this plan in place and we were so dialed in and wanted to leave no doubt, and we were it was a full gear change, head to toe, full clothing and food and everything else, backpack. And I was back out of camp in 6.5 or 7 minutes.
It was fast.
Yeah, it was by far the most efficient we've ever been. There was no messing around. And when I ran out of camp to start the second lap, I felt amazing. And the best I've felt leaving camp. Last year, 2017, when you guys were there, I even said on camera, like, it's really effing hard to leave camp right now.
Yeah.
Because I was worked after that 9.5 hour lap. I said it was the most damage I'd ever taken after a single lap at the Barkley, because that was only the 6th ever lap that I had done, the 4.5 with Jared, 4 with, half without. The first lap with John last year was the most damage I'd taken on a single lap. This year, perfect, great, high spirits. But then this weather system that had been forecast forever. I saw this 3 weeks out. On that day of the race, they were forecasting this major weather system for 30 to 40 millimeters of rain and thunder and lightning, and it just wasn't changing. It wasn't going away. It was when you see it predicted that far out and it doesn't change week over week, you know that you're going to get hit.
Yeah.
And it set in on us, and multiple things played out. At the start of that second lap, and myself, I ended up having to pair back up with Guillaume and Ali.
Right.
And the long story short is that we couldn't see 3 feet in front of us, a meter in front of us.
Fog, clouds, rain,
thunder, lightning. And actually, what's funny is I overlooked something in my race report, my write-up, and I had actually briefly forgotten as we were going to the second book counterclockwise when the storm was really coming down on us, and we really got lost. Like, we blew that book significantly. But there would be lightning that would light up the sky, And as it did, it was the only time you could see anything.
Man.
So there'd be a crash of lightning, and then you could see capstones and features, and you'd have a fraction of a second, and you go, where are we? And you try to take a mental picture of it, and then think, okay, what did I just glean from that half of a second of information that we were presented with? And then you would hope for more lightning to just give you another flash of like, okay, where are we right now?
Like a camera flash, essentially lighting up the environment.
Lighting up everything because you couldn't see anything otherwise. But we really messed up that book, and that was the precursor of things to come on that lap. And I do and did in my report want to preface by saying it wasn't impossible this year. It was just a much finer line, similar to what John and I had in 2017, where you couldn't make mistakes. It was doable.
Got it.
Like, I physically could have got through the race, and I kind of showed that by getting 3 laps done just over time. But you couldn't make mistakes, especially on that lap, and we did. We continued to make mistakes. And what was difficult is I was the only veteran in the group, and Guillaume and Ali are very strong, very good people to be with. Guillaume had showed on the lap prior because he had scouted some of the terrain you're allowed to scout 6 weeks prior. He was actually better than any of us because he had a much more recent experience over that terrain. So we defaulted to letting Guillaume lead at times, which was really funny to let a virgin lead veterans.
Right.
But he was so good. And one of the mistakes I made was just allowing that to happen again in the same spot where it was like, oh, well, Guillaume nailed this a lap ago on Stallion Mountain. Now we're at night going in the opposite direction, and Guillaume is leading because he knows this area best. And he had never been out there at night.
Right.
He had never gone counterclockwise. And it took me too long to step up. And because the weather was so bad and you're just focusing on trying to keep yourself warm and trying not to complain and trying to keep moving, by the time we really started working efficiently as a team of 3 rather than letting one person lead, we had gotten cliffed out and just blown another book significantly. And at that point, I felt the pit in my stomach halfway through the second lap where I went, I can't believe this. That was the best first lap I've ever had, and now we're up against the clock already in lap 2.
Yeah.
This is the Barkley. This is what happens, is that it's relentless. It doesn't allow for errors. It just doesn't. You can't let small mistakes become big mistakes, and I've said that forever, and we were letting small mistakes become big mistakes. And we corrected that and then started getting back, I think, on time a little bit, and then we had another really weird error. That one was on me, and by the time the sun came up, I mean, we were looking at the watch, and Ali with us had basically accepted that it wasn't happening.
Right.
And he jokingly said, so I looked at the guys and said, hey, are you okay if I head
ahead.
off? Like, I need to move. Like, I'm gonna bury myself right now to stay under time on course. And they said, yeah. And Ali joked, he's like, I'm gonna take a bearing for the nearest pub anyways. So
So you ended up, I mean, at that point, is your mind set on disaster? Like,
no, at that point I'm fighting tooth and nail because I'm not giving this up. I still think that I'm going to get this done, and I still think I'm going to find a way. And I ended up, there was one book to go counterclockwise, and I got into camp 30 minutes ahead of those guys.
Right.
And had a lengthier transition because we'd just been out in 4 degrees and torrential rain and flooding and mudslide, like us sliding in the mud type of thing. And it was the most challenging, difficult, frustrating, mentally and physically soul-destroying lap I've ever had at the Barkley Marathons.
Wow.
And when I got in after that lap, we took, I think it was the better part of 15 minutes because I had to peel layers off of myself, and issues had arisen from just being that wet for that long with chafing and everything else. And by the time I got changed and out of camp, it was about 15 minutes, which realistically was still a pretty fast time given the circumstances. But I knew as I left on that lap that I had to have a perfect lap to even be allowed to start the 4th lap of the Barkley.
Oh, of course.
But I believed in it, and I knew it was doable if I was smart about things and was feeling strong. I mean, it's the strongest I've ever felt at the Barkley. Doing the fun run at the Barkley, 3 laps, I've said this before, it's the hardest 100-miler I've ever done. The 3 laps at the Barkley. 3 laps at the Barkley is harder than Hurt. It's harder than UTMF. It's harder than any of the hundreds I've done.
Yeah.
And I was doing that for the 3rd year in a row. And as I was on that third lap, things were going really well. And then I found myself 34 hours into the race in daylight, thinking I was fresh and processing information properly, and I wasn't. And I made a small mistake that became a big mistake, and I dumped like 30 to 40 minutes unbelievably in this one area. And right when that happened, I went, you've got to be kidding me. This is it. This is the death blow. And I still rallied because I was still 2.5 or 3 hours from camp.
Yeah.
And did everything I could to get in time. And I came in after 3 laps in 36 hours and 12 minutes. By the time I grabbed the last book, I knew I was gonna come down in like 36 hours and 2 or 3 minutes.
Yeah, change.
I knew conclusively what I could do if I was to bury myself and pay a price for even having to continue on. And the math wasn't adding up. And I kind of had this moment of, I don't want this to be another like 60-second miss. I don't want to get down into camp in 36 hours and a minute. I felt like I didn't want that drama. I didn't want that attention. And I didn't want people to possibly think that I had decided I didn't want to continue.
Right.
And I was somehow timing it so that I was just going to miss. And I was going to be, I was within 60.
Right, adding to the, man, Gary's such a good actor and a good planner.
And so I did the math when I grabbed the book, and then I went up and over England, and I did the math again, and it correlated, and I went, okay, you're going to miss. You're going to miss by a minute or two. And at that point, I had been running hot for so long that I hadn't even put a jacket on, like all those things that I wouldn't take the time to do because it was right on the cusp. And I went, okay, sit down, put your jacket on, put in some calories, and grab some composure because you're about to be tapped out for the 3rd straight year.
Yeah.
And I came down in 36:12, but I probably took 10 minutes, 8 to 10 minutes kind of thing. Because even someone had said to me afterwards, they saw my headlamp up at the top and they were wondering what took so long. And I was like, honestly, I knew I wasn't going to make it. I didn't want to be the guy that like missed by 60 seconds for the 2nd straight year. I just wanted to get it over with at that point. So yeah, I took my time going down into camp and tried to process things before getting down and accepting my fate. And then I got there in 36:12, and that was the end of Barkley this year. Which is unbelievable to me 4 weeks later that it played out that way. I've never felt stronger, and I know the course well. I do realize that most finishes are accomplished when veterans get to work together. Mm-hmm. And the thing that John and I were able to do a year ago was really feed off of each other well. And I physically was moving faster this year than 2017, but John and I were more efficient. And John and I complemented each other perfectly, where everybody has books they're good at. Right. And in opposite directions, they're very different, clockwise and counter. And it seemed like the books I was strongest at, John was weakest at, and vice versa. And it seemed like it split down the middle, where it was like John was amazing at 6.5 of the 13 books.
Right.
And I was amazing at the other 6.5. And as soon as someone took a step in the wrong direction, the other person went, oh, no, 1 degree this way. And because of that, we got through essentially 3 laps without really making a mistake. And that was why John was able to finish on a year where doing a 9.5 hour first lap,
right.
People watching that understood the Barkley were like, okay, well, there won't be any finishers this year. John's finish is one of the most impressive finishes in the history of the race. Like the fact that he got through those conditions and we had those issues early on, and neither of us quit. Neither of us gave up mentally, and we worked to get back in the race together. Right. And I was carrying that with me this year. You know, last year people would have said after a lap, give up. Save yourself. You're not going to get this done. And It was doable. And this year was the same. It was doable if you could have found a way, if I could have found a way to get through that second lap 45 minutes quicker. And I could have. And it was just a couple of small mistakes that prevented that from happening. So the Barkley was doable this year, but it was extra challenging for a veteran to be out there by themselves. It's difficult. And for me, that also gives it it not validates, but it shows me how much more impressive Jared Campbell's finish is on the year that he did it entirely by himself.
Right.
Like, really, I don't even know that a lot of Barkley veterans could appreciate how difficult that is for 60 hours to be entirely self-sufficient, responsible. Similar to Jared, I don't mind being by myself. I actually was almost hoping this year that I would have 40 hours by myself. I said to Jared I was looking forward to that, and I was. I don't mind being out there by myself. I don't have a fear of being out there at night and everything. But to stay cognizant for that long, to be able to continue to find yourself on the map when you're that deprived is exceptional. And I got a taste of just like how much harder it gets every few hours. I was in the 30s for hours. We'll get into the 40s and 50s by yourself and try to keep doing that. And it's unfathomable to me. So,
well, I know that we'll talk more about both Jared and John when we talk during the movie, because the movie does document your experiences with both of those gentlemen. It's interesting to see and to follow this story year after year. And I know you as a friend and as a person now, and it as an outsider, I don't have to live through the incredible pain that you do every time you talk about this and share your experiences. So we obviously appreciate you opening up with our audience and with those who viewed the movie.
Someone tweeted to me just a few days ago, and I really appreciated it because I needed this reminder. But they said it was something to the effect of, "Wow, what a crazy year. You were the only person that finished the fun run. That must make you so proud." And I responded, honestly, I haven't gotten there yet. Yeah. I am not proud of that because I still haven't gotten past the emotional component of not accomplishing my ultimate goal of finishing. It's tough when you're in it, because when you're in anything like this, it lingers and it goes on forever. And when you're free of it, when you're clear of it, whether that's like an injury, like I broke my foot twice and I was on crutches for 8.5 months in a calendar year. And when you're in it, it just never ends. And the second you're free of it, it feels like time speeds up for the distance you get from it. Yeah. And I'm in this 3 now going to be 4-year thing when I eventually decide to go back, and it lingers. It just feels like it's always there. And eventually, after I find a way to finish this thing, I will cherish every step of the journey. Like, I will look back on every step of this and all of what it was, and I will absolutely cherish that for what it gave to me and what it taught me. But right now, in this exact moment, 4 weeks after getting back from Tennessee, not having been confronted with talking it through with people, it's still fresh, and I still haven't gotten to a point where I can celebrate anything. I'm still really disappointed by the way it played out, and actually something, I was on a run yesterday, and it felt nice to be out. We've just had a shift in weather here. It feels summer. It feels like summer right now at the end of April, and it feels nice to be 4 weeks out, mostly recovered from the race, because I didn't get a chance to kill myself. The 3 laps at the Barkley for a fun run is the hardest 100-miler I've ever done. The 4th lap starts to really break you down physically. Blisters, chafing, fatigue, injury. You're basically pushing through injury as you get there. And the 5th lap is mind-altering, mind-bending pain and suffering beyond anything you would ever subject yourself to on any other circumstances, other than knowing that the end is imminent and it's everything you've wanted to get to experience, is that finish. But that getting through the full 5th lap last year, like John said, it's like a factor of 10 harder than getting through 4 laps. And that absolutely annihilates you. And the one positive with the race this year, as I said, I've said, is that if the end was inevitably not finishing again, it's easier to accept it after it being 3 laps where I didn't quit, I timed out, nobody was ahead of me, than it would be after 4 or 5. Because
I can imagine,
last year I got through the course, I didn't finish, and then I had to deal with the full recovery, months on end, of not being a Barkley finisher, but giving as much physically as any Barkley finisher ever has.
Right.
And that was really tough. And this year, it's been kind of nice to just feel a little bit more human a lot quicker.
Be able to run in the sunshine yesterday.
Yeah, exactly. And when I was out there, this is what the whole point of what I started with was it's been nice to get away from the Barkley a little bit, but it's still always kind of there. It's always kind of this undertone. I don't know if a day goes by that I don't think about it in some point, and it's been like that for 3 years, which can become torturous sometimes. You feel like you're locked into this mental prison. But yesterday, I was out there, and it's that like, God, if I could just go back again in 2 weeks and start again, I could finish this thing. Like, I know that if I could just reset, and I had the same feeling last year, not this quickly, but I want another shot. I don't want to wait a year or two or whatever to go back. And I kind of said to myself, last year from 2017 to 2018, it actually felt like it came up too quickly.
I mean, it was fast, man.
It felt like I was back in Frozen Head before I knew it, and that I was actually over that last couple of building blocks of training was going, how is this possibly here already? And that it just allowed me to relax a little bit and go, okay, be present, be in this moment, appreciate where you are right now. You're going to get your shot at this again, and it's going to come up quicker than you want it to. So don't long for that year of your life to pass more rapidly than it already will. Cherish each day along the way, and you'll be standing back in Frozen Head before you know it. I am not going on record as saying we're going in 2019. We are going to take some time and space and distance, and we won't even discuss this until later in the year. But Barkley 2019 will be upon us in what will feel like a matter of days.
Yeah.
Because time flies when you're having fun.
I mean, that kind of segues into the talk about this event defining you or being what you're known for. I know you. I've known you long before your Barkley experiences with FKTs and races, being a race director, a coach, and a runner in the sport for a long time, an adventurer. Now a lot of people know you as the guy that ran Barkley, or
only know me, yeah.
Only know you as that. Is that hard to have that association?
Yeah, it is, because I haven't finished the damn race. So It's like, why do I have more notoriety than the 15 people that have finished it?
Right.
How many people watching this right now even know 4 names? How many people know anyone besides Jared and John and the people in the last few years? Right. So it is difficult to be fully associated and known with an event that you haven't even finished, that technically I failed at every single time I've shown up. Mm-hmm. It's a weird dichotomy to be presented with, having so much notoriety come from essentially, and I make that joke all the time. I mean, my business partners for my events and coaching business, when we recently did website upgrades, and they said do a bio, and I was like, whatever you write is fine. And both of them wrote this like joking, like Eric from coaching just wrote like something along the lines like most famous guy to not finish the Barkley twice or something. And he thought I was going to want to correct it, and I laughed, and I was like, yeah, that's perfect.
Keep it. Oh man.
Whatever.
Well, I appreciate you taking the time to talk a little bit about the 2018 experience. It is fresh, and this is the first real talk that you've done.
I had just as many requests for interviews this year as I did last year. Last year I did 33 interviews before I finally said, I've talked about this enough.
Yeah.
And there was no shortage this year, but I just, I didn't want to talk about it. It's just plain and simple. I wanted immediately when it ended at 36 hours, 12 minutes, and we got the bugle and we were walking back to our tent, my very first thought was, I wish nobody was watching right now. I wish I could just go home and be the only person that's going through this for me, and not have so many other people wrapped up in the experience. And I don't want that to be taken wrong, because it's entirely supportive and flattering and amazing that so many people have actually that care. And it's a wonderful thing to feel that when I'm out there.
Yeah.
But it also leads to a little bit of feeling like I let people down. And I know that's not rational, and it just takes me a little while to like remind myself of that, obviously. But there is that moment of like feeling like there's a letdown that goes beyond just me, and not wanting to disappoint anybody.
Right. Well, I can guarantee you a lot of the people watching this are really mad that you didn't like at you. No, I mean, it's great that we're able to even talk about this, and I know that our viewers appreciate it. I appreciate it. We are going to move on to part two. Part two, we're actually going to sit down, watch the movie, talk about the movie in 2016 and 17. Really appreciate you taking the time to talk about 2018.
This is interesting because when I last watched this movie, it was in Toronto at our last film screening.
Right.
It was our 17th show. When first I proposed this, we started talking about this of like, hey, we should do like a bigger film tour.
Yeah.
And we came to terms with it. My initial thought before ever seeing the film was, okay, I will watch it twice before we go on tour, and then I'll be totally cool with everything. And I'll be like disconnected from what happens on the screen. And 17 shows later, I was like, okay, I'm sick of crying. I'm sick of watching this happen. I am glad I never have to watch it again. And as I sit here now, having not looked at this since January, I can already tell that it's going to be the exact same emotional roller coaster for me. And this will be the last time that I watch this film.
Until we watch it again tomorrow night. I can't wait. We're going to watch it every night for the next week. I'm actually going to end this part. This will be a separate video file. So if you want to watch us talk about the movie, the director and the star of the movie, there's another video file that you can just double click, open up, check it out. So thanks, Gary. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. And thank you.